Hey guys, Sonyx here. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Today we're going to be doing a weapons tier list for Apex Legends Season 28. Now, this season brought a ton of new changes and it shifted the meta a little bit for different weapon classes and even individual weapons themselves. So this is going to be a very interesting tier list, and we're just going to go with our thought process of why we ranked each weapon in the category that they belong. So we're going to get started with the R301. Now, this weapon easily, guys, always an S tier weapon. You know, the R3 is the jack of all trades and it masters a lot. So it's great at close range hip fire. You know, this thing can shred. Mid range, perfect. Even long range, you know, if you have a 2 to 4 3 times, the R3 is the quintessential best type of weapon in Apex. It's a standard AR that literally there's nothing wrong with it, right? So, and it just got buffed, you know, last season. So the R3 is quite literally one of the best weapons, and it probably will always be one of the top weapons in the game. Nothing can ever really top the R3. So I'm gonna go ahead and place an S tier. So now we have the R9. Now the R9 and a lot of the SMGs last season were really focused on. So I personally think that the R3 and the R9, I mean, a lot of the light weapons, I'm going to be real with you guys, are always going to be S tier. You know, it's kind of like that's kind of the way the light weapons are. They're very favored. And if you have the R3 and the R9 together, I mean, that's kind of game over, right? So the R99, one of the fastest time to kill weapons in the game. Close range, this thing can just pretty much shred anybody. Mid range, it's not bad actually. And you know, the recoil for this is way easier to control versus some SMGs here. And the fact that this weapon in itself has been, you know, it's kind of been reworked before, but then when it was in the care pack, but once it came out of the care pack, it still stayed, you know, just as strong. So I would say the R3 and the R9 is you know, neck and neck. So this is like the little brother version, and this is like the older brother version. And yeah, man, that's why you see a lot of players running these guys. So the next one is the Alternator. Now, admittedly, the Alternator was previously an F tier weapon. Yeah, this was not a good weapon at all. In fact, there was a tier below F tier, it would probably be down there previously. But after they got double tap and then they actually worked on the base weapon itself, not just with a hop up, this is easily an A tier weapon now. The reason why it doesn't belong in S tier is because it requires the hop up for it to be a great weapon, right? Double tap is a type, is that thing shreds. That is one of the fastest time to kill weapons and easily beats most of the weapons here in this list. But you need to be able to use and unlock double tap for it to be that effective. As a base weapon, an Alternator will not be able to outgun an R9, even like compared to the RE itself as well. So it's a great weapon once it gets double tap. And even when it gets double tap, it doesn't have the same range that it does if it didn't have double tap. So you're kind of limited now. You have to swap between, you know, using it in its regular Alternator mode for some range, and then if you want to go with that really close range fire, you also have to make sure all of your shots hit, and then that's when double tap, you know, really takes effect. So it's a strong weapon, sure, but it's not like as strong as the R9 is, just kind of straight out the gate. So, but definitely jumped up from the bottom of the barrel from the previous seasons for sure. All right, now we have the Spitfire. Okay, the Spitfire honestly is a C tier weapon, right? It's not as great as the R3, and it's not as great as something like the G7. You know, out of all of the light weapons, I think the Spitfire is kind of the weakest one. It can't really long range, like I said, and then close range you have the R9. It sits in a weird middle zone between kind of the light weapons. So it falls short in close range, it falls short and long range, and its best place is kind of that in between middle range, which it's kind of difficult to be able to get kills like that because most players are running and gunning up close nowadays, you know, with a meta change. So it can't really keep up. So the Spitty, it was great when it was first released as a heavy weapon, but unfortunately now as a light weapon, it did get, you know, some nerfs, and it just doesn't feel the same. And you guys will notice every time you run the Spitty, you just kind of want to swap it to something else. So the next one, we have the G7. Now this is a weapon, so I apologize if this is not colored red, because we're using a season 27 kind of tier list maker thing. But the G7 is now a care package weapon, so it easily is going to S tier. It is one of the strongest weapons right now. Like it quite literally could shred people faster than the Kraber sometimes, because the Kraber requires that extra shot, right? The G7 has that double tap built in. You know, by the time you pick it up, you don't even need to farm Evo for it, like the hop up for it. You automatically get double tap, and this thing you can have the infinite ammo on this. This thing is really fast. This is probably the strongest gun in the game right now. It's not even funny. So yeah, and then you can also put a 4 to 8 on this thing. Yeah, that makes it even scarier. So yeah, the G7 easily, the time to kill on this thing from medium to even long range. This thing is absolutely deadly. And while we're in that note, let's just put the Kraber obviously at S tier. Sorry, this list kind of looks funny now because we have a lot in S tier. I think we're just getting out the way the most goated weapons, of course. And I promise there are going to be other tiers here, okay? The reason why we have the Kraber at S tier is because, I mean, it is the Kraber, right? You know, there's nothing that can stop the amount of damage you do per bullet here. It is still the strongest weapon in the game. So the Kraber is going to be the Kraber no matter what. S tier, you can't really argue with that. It's always going to be really strong. And the fact that there's infinite ammo that you can get with an amp, and you can get infinite Kraber bullets, I mean, how much better can you want it without? So now we have the Flatline. Now the Flatline is a great weapon, and I would say it's a solid B tier for me. Personally, the R3 is still a little bit better, even though the Flatline technically does more damage per bullet. The Flatline's recoil control is a little bit more difficult, so you can't long range with this as much as the R3. It's not such an easy weapon to be using. As a hipfire potential, it does have, you know, similar values as the R3, where it can hipfire really well. But obviously, heavy weapons in general are going to fall shorter on this list, just because they don't stack as much per ammunition either, right? You only get 60 versus the, I think, 72 for light. So it's not going to be as strong, you know, in a looting perspective as well. So in general, an R3 is going to outgun a Flatline in most scenarios, because the Flatline is just generally harder to use. So this weapon used to be really great when it had like the anvil receiver, which I think could be, you know, really beneficial if they brought the anvil receiver back. Easily the Flatline can go up to A or even S tier, but right now it doesn't really have anything really going for it except just being like an average standard AR. Next thing we have is the Hemlock. So the Hemlock is just a little bit lower now. Actually, I'm gonna rank the Hemlock a little bit lower than the Spitfire, because, you know, with ARs, usually, like I said, the R3 and the Flatline are usually the kings of the AR. Yeah, but the actual Hemlock itself doesn't have anything going for it at all. You know, it really is just an average burst rifle. You know, it's nothing special about it, and it can really be, you know, outgunned very easily by other marksman weapons itself, because this is supposed to be a little bit of a longer range AR. So you can put a 2-4 on this thing, a barrel stave, and you could arguably start to challenge like the 30-30, even the bow. But then you might as well go with those weapons. You know what I'm saying? Because the Hemlock just cannot outgun that. And when you go to a little bit closer range, you have the R3, the Flatline, and then there's going to outbeam the Hemlock. So arguably the Hemlock sits at a solid D tier. Honestly, I'm going to bump it down to E tier, because there's just no viability for it in this season. Now, talking about marksman weapons, we have the 30-30. This is going to be, yeah, honestly, the 30-30 is probably going to go to F tier. They nerfed this last season, right? When they didn't want like the marksman guns, but they made it even worse now. they nerfed the heck out of this weapon. So it only got one thing. The fact that it can get the dual shell, That does not even, it doesn't matter. Like, they reduce the damage of this. There's no more scope. There's basically no more hop up called Skull Piercer. And I mean, what's the point in running the 30-30? Marksman weapons this season are just completely kind of useless because, first of all, no one's going to be playing longer range unless you're playing like high elo ranked. But in most case scenarios, in almost every game mode, it's kind of useless now to run the 30-30. It used to be at the top of the meta, which is why I think kind of Respawn tackled that very, very strong. And now we have this meta. It's shifted a little bit. So yeah, the 30-30 is kind of at the bottom of the barrel. It is still good if you can hit your shots with it, but the fact that you have to charge it up when you have the G7 here as a care pack weapon, easily night and day difference there for sure. So we have the Rampage next. We're going to go ahead and put that to a solid D tier. Honestly, I'm going to put it to E tier. The Rampage, that's kind of like the lowest barrel, the lowest bottom of the barrel LMG. Every other LMG in this list is going to be better than the Rampage. You need a thermite for this to be effective, and it feels kind of weird to be using this at a range, right? It's kind of like, it's like an automatic sort of G7, because you could slap a 2-4 on this thing. This has no recoil, but it requires that thermite to be effective, you know, at some type of range or even close range. So it suffers that same thing like the Alternator. It requires something else for it to be greater, which is not a bad thing, right? But the fact that other weapons here as a base weapon already outgun this, it easily falls us up at least to D tier. But I feel like the Rampage just doesn't match compared to the other LMGs that we're going to talk about. So I'm happy with it at sitting at E tier for right now. Now we have the Prowler. Okay, the Prowler for me, it was like down here before, but now they reworked the Prowler really well, and then you can actually make it fully automatic with the hop up. So the select fire receiver, easily now at B tier. I honestly think the Prowler is just as strong as the Alternator, but it's harder to control the burst. Like, it's not as forgiving as the Alternator, where if you miss some bullets, well, Alternator, perfect, that's fine. You just recenter back on your opponent, you'll probably end up knocking them. If you miss with a Prowler, that's kind of where things can go wrong, because now you're going to end up, you know, getting knocked because you missed a 5 bullet burst. So it's a great weapon once you have the hop up, but like I said, it's really difficult to be able to control this burst. But if you can hit your shots, oh, this weapon is easily S tier, but it's a very difficult weapon to use for sure. But I love once you start to get locked in, Prowler is a great weapon for sure. All right, now we have the Havoc. Havoc is amazing, honestly. They did make it easier to be able to get turbocharger this season, so I think the Havoc sits a really nice, comfortable place at A tier. And although the recoil for the Havoc is always, you know, has always been a very hard recoil to control, it's still a very solid weapon, similar to the way the R3 works, where you can kind of mid-range with this. You can't really long range with this, and that's how you can kind of spot if people are doing something very sus. But you can't, yeah, like I said, you can't really long range with the Havoc, but you can mid range with it. You know, you could slap on a 2-4 on this thing, and it could shred people at a decent distance, not too far, and at a close range. If you like hip fire with the Havoc, I mean, this thing will shred people like no one's business. So I think the Havoc, it's not as strong as it was before. You know, at S tier when it had like that little charge rifle hop up thing that you could do. Select fire receiver, but it is pretty strong now. So I think the Havoc is at a pretty good place at A tier, and kind of will always be at a pretty solid area. The Nemesis. Now, honestly, I think the Nemesis is a great weapon, right? It has decent range, but now it suffers from the close range potential, right? It's not as versatile as the R3 or the Havoc, but it is decent at a kind of medium to longer range distance. This one you could actually slap a 2-4 on this, and you could pick people from a decent range. Is it the best energy weapon out there? Probably not. You know, I think the triple take, even though this one got nerfed, this one easily can still go up to A tier, because I personally tested this one in the firing range, and the triple take's hip fire speed is still fast. Like they said that they reduced the fire rate a little bit, but it still feels inhumanly fast. And then so you can run the triple take as a long range weapon, mid range, and a close range shotgun. The Nemesis, not so much. So, you're kind of stuck in one place there. And, this thing will eat bullets like nobody's business, right? The triple take just uses one bullet per shell. So it's a lot more cost efficient for your actual backpack and looting situation. So I think the triple take is, since it came out of the care pack last season, it's still just as strong, maybe slightly weaker, but this thing still shreds people really, really well. The Volt. I don't think the Volt has ever really been anything below C tier. I think the Volt has always been a solid SMG. There's really nothing wrong with the Volt. Like, this thing can medium range really well. You could slap a 2x on this thing, and the Volt will absolutely decimate people. For close range combat, I think it's a little bit slower time to kill than actual SMGs are here. And I don't have the exact damage numbers per weapon pulled up, but you'll know, like a Volt will not be able to outgun an R9 or a double tap Alternator, but which I think, now thinking about it, I think it falls in a solid B tier, to be honest. It's not going to be able to outgun the really truly fast time to kill SMGs, right? But it can do some pretty good work. Even if it's not able to, completely outgun these, it can have more range, which gives it a little bit more versatility. So I think the Volt is at a solid B tier. It's just a really good normal weapon, right? There's nothing really wrong with it, but there's just some things that are a little bit better than the Volt. Now we have the L-Star. Okay, after trying the L-Star this season, guys, it's very simple. The L-Star is an absolute machine. It feels like the bullet sizes are larger now, and then they can, I don't know, like it feels like it shreds people a lot easier. So try the L-Star for yourself, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you'll feel like this weapon is a laser beam. When it comes to close range, the L-Star is also really great because you don't ever have to really reload this thing. This is the only weapon here you never have to reload. You can time this right, and the L-Star will absolutely shred people like no one's business. The only thing that I will say about the L-Star is that most people kind of misuse it, and they'll accidentally put a 2x scope on it, which it can work for that, but it doesn't have the ability to be able to put a barrel stab on this anymore, so you can't really long range. This is more like it kind of fits in the same category as like SMGs. Like, this is a close range weapon, so that's the one thing, like, that is kind of holding it back from becoming an S tier weapon. It's before when they were able to have max attachments in the L-Star, this thing could range anything. You'd be able to do long range, middle range, and close range. But now it's more of just a close range weapon that can still kind of be on par with the Alternator and kind of like the siblings here. All right, now we have the Devo. I think the Devo is a solid C tier weapon, because personally for me, I feel like the Havoc is just a little bit stronger than the Devo, because this one is, once you get turbo on the Havoc, you don't feel the wind up time at all. Like, you'll start, but the Devo, even though you have the turbo on this thing, you'll still feel a tiny little bit of wind up, and it's a little bit harder to use at range. The actual range for the Devo isn't as strong as the actual Havoc is. I mean, both these weapons are not really meant for range. They're meant for, like, mid range, so maybe like more close range. But yeah, the Devo has probably one of the worst recoil patterns that exists and still will be in the game. So it's not a bad weapon. You still have to get turbocharger for this to work. So kind of off the rip, it is a very difficult choice to argue that it's a great weapon. But since Arsenal exists, it's not too bad to be able to kind of upgrade this throughout the map. But yeah, if you're caught in the middle of a gunfire and someone has an R9 and you have a Devo and this thing does not have turbo, you're most likely going to lose that fight. Even with a Volt, L-Star, everything else is going to outgun the Devo if this does not have turbo. If it does have turbo, and it's easier to access turbo, much faster, it would probably be an A tier weapon, but right now I think the Devo sits comfortably at a C tier. All right, next we have, oh guys, I'm just going to go ahead and put this here. But I don't think I need any explanation of why the RE45 is an S tier weapon. This thing right here absolutely shreds people. It has a little bit of a wind up time, just like any, a lot of these energy weapons do, but the fact that the RE45 is now energy, the time to kill on this thing is ridiculous. You can pull off 1v2s, 1v3s, 1v4s, pretty much anything you want to do as a base weapon. This thing is what the Alternator is, a double tap, but you don't need anything on this thing. So, R9 and RE, two strongest close range weapons in the entire game right now. Like you just, these things are monsters. So I think the RE is a lot better as an energy weapon than it is as a light weapon, which I'm really happy about. That, I hope they don't change that soon, but you never know, right? All right, now we have the Wingman. The Wingman, it's a very hard one to actually kind of list the Wingman. It's a very high risk, high reward kind of weapon. But the Skull Piercer isn't on it. Simply that. I mean, that's it is. Sorry guys, I stuttered there. That's what it's holding it back from becoming a better weapon, right? Like this one would probably be up to A tier or S tier if it had Skull Piercer still. It would easily be S tier if it still was running heavy. Okay, let's be real. But it's not. I don't think it's ever going to go back to heavy. The fact that it's sniper kind of brings it down a little bit. It's still a very, very strong weapon for sure, but it doesn't have Skull Piercer, so it's going to be a solid B tier for me. So that's not too bad of a ranking there. The longbow, yeah, that's going to go to D tier. It's a strong weapon for sure, no matter what. It's a true sniper rifle, not a marksman, so it can dish out some serious damage. And it's a lot easier to use with a Sentinel than the Sentinel for sure. But the only thing that's holding it back is, like I said, it does not have the Skull Piercer potential. And long range weapons have just gotten nerfed. The more and more in the more we go in these seasons of Apex, right? So I arguably think that the longbow needs some kind of stopping power for it to become effective again. But I'm kind of glad that towards the bottom of this list, we see more and more kind of long range weapons. Even the charge rifle, like the charge rifle is kind of a solid D tier weapon. It is strong now with a new hop up for it, but it's still not going to be able to, beat the G7 or the Kraber, no matter what. Like these weapons are just going to be kind of in the back burner. But these are like almost like the filler weapons. I think the Sentinel, I had it way up here before, but as the meta's shifting, I think I can put the Sentinel to C tier. It's hard for me to do that because the Sentinel is my favorite weapon in the game, but I kind of have to do it. Yeah, that's a tough one. I feel like I'm gonna swap the Wingman and the Sentinel because the Sentinel still is really powerful when you charge it up with a cell. You can still get one, single shot knocks with this thing if you get a headshot. So it's not bad. Like it's the only weapon that is comparable to the Kraber for sure. But this is a ground weapon, so it's not going to be as strong as a base body shot of the Kraber. But this can fight a Kraber, So yeah, the Sentinel is up there for sure. And I really like the list so far. Now we have the Mozam. Okay, if we're thinking single Mozam, easily an E tier weapon. But now we have double Mozams. The double Mozams have not been touched at all. Okay, I was talking to the weapons kind of respawn developer, and they said that all of these, this is going to be a shotgun meta. That's what saving the best for last, I guess. So I was asking like, oh, so what's gonna happen? We have the what is that called? The double tap here, and we have the dual shell here, and then we have the disruptor rounds. There we go for the PK, right? So each of these have their own little hop up. But I was like, well, why doesn't the Mozam have any kind of hammer point or anything? It's because it's really strong already as a base weapon, and once you have this dual, it's so freaking strong. Honestly, it probably is like easily A tier once it's dual. Once you have two of them. Personally, for me, it's a skill issue thing. Once it's dual, I just cannot seem to hit my shots as well. But try it out for yourself, and once you have two, you will melt pretty much anyone. Like it's ridiculous how fast time to kill a double double Mozam is. Okay, and it goes to show you that it does not need hammer point to shred because it's really strong as by itself. Now we have the EVA 8. The EVA 8 now has double tap. It's this thing shreds, absolutely shreds people. It's scary how much this thing is really, really strong. So I think the EVA 8 is a generally decent weapon. Before it would probably fall down to C tier. The fact that you can get double tap on this thing easily bumps it up, I think, B tier still. Because I tried it out. Like I said, I've been playing the new season for about a week, almost 2 weeks now, and so if you miss the double tap shots, you'll end up actually putting yourself at a disadvantage because it takes a while for you to get your next two shots again to be able to use double tap. So you have to be very, very, very accurate with the I feel like with any shotgun you do, but especially for the EVA 8, if you miss those double tap shots, you're kind of dead. So I mean, that's the main thing that I feel like it's a great weapon now for those people who can master it. But as a weapon itself without the hop up, it's still just okay. All right, the Mastiff. Honestly, the Mastiff got a buff this season. You get dual shell on this thing. You get more damage per pellet. They did reduce, I think, the pellet, like how many how many is shot, but they increase the damage per actual round. So it's kind of like balance itself almost, but you get dual shell with this thing, so you can reload, and instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every time you reload, it'll be like 2, 4, 6. So it's such a powerful weapon now. I mean, the Mastiff has always been a great weapon for sure, but now it has more capabilities. It has more stopping power. So I think it's very difficult because I feel like double tap in itself, because dual shell does not actually increase the damage of the weapon. It just makes it easier to use and reload. But the dual shell actually increases the DPS. So I'm going to go ahead and swap those two. So now we have Eva at A tier and we have the Mastiff at B tier. It's something that I never thought I would do, but here we are, right? PK, I mean S tier, guys. I'm sorry. What can you do, right? The PK has disruptor rounds. It does 107 damage per body shot, and so obviously this thing is going to shred people, right? There's no doubt about it. The PK can 2-tap purple armor, so easily the PK is back at S tier. Without the not the hammer points, the disruptor rounds, it would probably go down to like A or B tier because it's still pretty solid. But the fact that it can even mid to long range, because you could snipe with this thing, makes it easily an S tier weapon as well. So very versatile, very great weapon for sure. And then now we have the bow. All right, we're gonna drop the bow down to D tier. Honestly, and I mean to say this, the fact that the bow actually got a nerf this season, I think it only does 60 damage instead of 65. I'm not sure. You guys have to read the patch notes a little bit more clearly. I went over them in my, everything new in season 28. But from what I can remember, this definitely got a nerf. And the bow, like I said, it's not able to kind of keep up with some of these longer range weapons that are dedicated for, long range. Like the Sentinel is probably going to outdo the bow. The G7 is definitely going to outdo the bow. Kraber as well. Triple take as well. So I mean, it's not, it's an okay weapon, but it's very, I don't know, it's very outdated now. You know, it's, the bow had its prime and it kind of went away. So that's the bow for you. All right, now we're gonna do the P20s. These are back on the ground now, and it does have hammer point. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in C tier. It did get a lot of nerfs because it's not a care pack weapon. So it got some nerfs about it that made it just not as strong, obviously, to rebalance things. But it's still a pretty solid weapon. I mean, I've tried it out, especially with once you have the dual P20s. This thing melts people. Like it's kind of scary how much this melts people. But it's not as strong as the R9 or the Alternator double tap or like the PK disruptors. So I'm happy with it being at C tier. It probably is more like a B.5 between C and B. If possible, I could put it there. But it's pretty good now. So I'm gonna go ahead and take it there. You know, care pack status, it would probably be at A tier, but it's not, so it obviously has to drop a little bit lower. Now we have the C.A.R. Oh, easily the C.A.R has disruptor rounds and hammer point. It's an easily S tier weapon. You can swap between both, and you whatever you use, you're gonna end up most likely killing anyone that you run into, especially the fact that you can have the infinite ammo. This thing will eat ammo like no one's business. So make sure you have some type of that amp for sure. But I think the C.A.R has always been a really strong kind of care pack weapon. Yeah, as a ground weapon, I don't think it would be as high. Obviously, it would probably fall as like C tier. But as a care pack weapon, the fact that you can have disruptors on this thing, yeah, I mean, you're just gonna shred shields like no one's business for sure. So I'm very happy with this list. But yeah, this is. Let me see if there's anything I would change here. No, I think we have a lot of S tier weapons this season, huh? I noticed that. As you can tell, it naturally rises up to the shotguns for sure, because shotguns got buffed. We have a lot of SMGs up close. It's still SMG meta. We have some marksmans, like the G7, of course. Triple Tick is the only kind of marksman in A tier. All the other marksmans kind of fell to D tier, F tier. So, yeah, I like this list because it kind of captures and encapsulates the meta for this season, which is going to be strong shotgun and SMG. And kind of weaker on the marksman and longer range weapons for sure. So let me know if you agree with this. If you don't, what would you change in this list? But if you guys are interested, do not click away yet. I do have a Legends tier list for season 28, and if that's something that you are interested in, click on this video here and let me know what your thoughts are and who the best Legends are. Right now, Fuse and Catalyst and Bloodhound got a ton of buffs, so that shifted the meta a lot. So go ahead and click that video, and I will see you there. Have a good one.